Welcome back, guys, and part two of the season preview with myself and Luke from the Rugby League Lounge, and a lot of feedback from the last week's video, which actually came out at the start of this week, actually, and just about some of the teams so far. Already, there's some difference of opinions, which is probably the best thing about this game that we follow and love, is that everyone has their different thoughts around how the teams will go and which teams go well, which teams will struggle, things like that. So love hearing all the opinions out there. And I think it shows that this year might be, I feel like we say it every year, but I actually feel like this year could be one of the closest ones we've had in quite some time. And a lot of teams trying to push into that eight that look like they could realistically do that. But enough from me. Luke, you're back again. We've got episode two of us joining together for this year. And part two as well. Any thoughts about last week? Anything you want to take back? Any teams you think might surprise, or teams you gave a rap to, which you're thinking, oh, now I've slept on that a few times. I don't know.
And yeah, cheers, mate. It's good to be back into it, and it was good just to talk footy. Like I
Yeah.
said, we kind of had a year off. I had a big year off, kind of my page, so you don't realize how much you miss something until you have it back into your life. So, no, I don't actually. I'm actually feeling pretty solid about a couple of the things about most of the thoughts we had on the teams, but I tell you what. That is definitely going to be rare. There's going to be a lot of flipping and turning and
Yeah.
change of opinions. And to be fair, I think some of the teams that we're going to be talking about today, I feel that way about it as well. One minute I'm thinking this, and next minute, yeah, it's a completely different way. So you'll be interested to hear your point of view and to see where we align and see where we differ.
Yeah, I think this video, guys, and I know we haven't done many yet, but this one will be a cracker because I think this part of the table from last year to this year, I think these are the teams that really have either an upwards or a downwards trajectory. And there's some teams here which could shock with what we say, were either good or bad. So last week, if you haven't listened to that video or that podcast yet, we just went through quickly the Dolphins, Tigers, the Warriors, the Knights, the Titans, and the Bulldogs as well. So we'll kick off today with the Manly Sea Eagles and their stars over there fixing his hamstring in Tom Trbojevic, and I feel like we haven't seen him for a while. It's been disappointing for a league fan, and I bet almost brings a tear to the eye of the Manly fans as well, because without him, they're a completely different side, unfortunately. But Luke, where are you at now with the Manly Sea Eagles for the 2023 season?
I am probably flipped over to the side of them going down the ladder again, to be fair. I do believe that a lot of it rests on Tommy, but I do think that even with Tommy in the picture, they don't have that comparing to when they were at their peak with Tommy at full powers. And let's just be honest, Tommy is fantastic, but it's going to be very hard for him to even return to that form, especially with these repeated injuries. And also the game has differed in terms of those rule sets. That was favouring the attacking team more than we've ever seen the rule sets do in the past. So I do believe that their roster is weaker now. I don't think there's any arguing that. I'm not sold on. I am. I'm sure. I'm sold on Schuster as a talent, but there's a few other things I'm not sold on him, and I don't really want to get into that kind of argument today. I think he can be a great six, but a lot of that is going to rely on his shoulders, and also just a loss of form. Form's a huge loss. We talked about his impact on the Titans last week. I think there's weaknesses in the backs, there's weaknesses in the forwards. I love Olakuatu. I think he is on when he's on his game, you can make an argument he's a top five back rower. He was fantastic last year. Jake Trbojevic, Cherry Evans, look, solid players worthy of their rep status, but there's limitations, and a lot of times you question how good really are they. And then Seabold comes in. There's a lot of question marks for me. And look, we talked about potential wooden spoons last week, and there's another team that's going to come up, and probably immediately we tease one. I've actually got this team in the midst of it as well. I don't have a good feeling about the Sea Eagles this year, but there's also that Tommy factor and proved me wrong and me forgetting actually no, he is that damn good. So for me, man, I'm not feeling great about the Seagulls, but I do love a lot of their young talent.
Yeah. I'm with you. Not to be boring to start off with, but I'm with you with Manly, and I just can't wrap my head around him. And the thing that makes me worried about going out and saying it about him is that, as you said, Tommy could turn up like he did the year before in 2021 and just turn it on. And if he does that, then we've got eggs on our faces. But at the same time, you sort of got to be realistic with it as well. And hamstring injuries and leg injuries and things like that are something that doesn't just go away. They can stay there. He's had it a number of times now, and we've just seen, and he's had his obviously the shoulder as well last year, and we're just, for how good he is, Manly. It's a hard one for Manly because they need to put so much money into him and his brother as well to keep him there. But whenever one of them's there, not there, it's such a hole. And I argue with this all the time. They're Manly. Them two are Manly. And I know Cherry Evans is there, but for mine, you'd rather Cherry out every day of the week over Turbo, in my opinion. And I think we mentioned this last week, when teams are wanting that one player to stay fit and that's what they're relying on to do and to make it a successful year, I think that's when you've got to worry a little bit, because I don't think that's a healthy roster then, if that's what it's all it will take for it to go down, you know what. So we've also seen last year where the jersey and that sort of whole fiasco did to the club, and you've sort of got that in the back of your mind still going, has the playing group really gotten back together? Or that will always pop up this year. There'll be times throughout where there'll be questions about stuff. There'll be, who knows, there might be an idea about doing it again this year. I think there's already talk about that. Will it pop up again? You don't know. And it changed that club so quickly that last year when it happened, it could happen again. And that's why for me, I'm similar to you. I just can't put him anywhere near my 8. I'm with you. I've got him going down actually. And there's some teams below them for mine who roster-wise have built a much better roster moving forward and a much stronger roster. Like if you look at the gains, they've got Tuolangi from the Tigers, great young prospect, Condon, Cooper Johns, and Nathaniel Roach. So not really 3 names for mine who stick out and go, they're going to change Manly for sure. But then they lost. Kieran Foran was one of the big instigators of getting them going the right way, especially to help Cherry Evans out. Dylan Walker, who was doing an amazing job off the bench in that 14 role for him. And Tapau, I know he was probably a little bit off, but he was still one of their better forwards in my opinion on a weekly basis. And Andrew Davey can do a job in the second row for him as well. So they've lost some pretty big talent-wise and not really replaced that. So I'm with you, mate. I don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like you brought up those players, immediately my ears popped up on actually like, I do like those players, but it's a sense like, say, if the Panthers signed them or the Storm signed them or those teams with those proven systems, it'd be like, they've done it again. They've got those players that have shown a glimpse of something and they're going to turn them into borderline rep players. Not saying, but like it's one of those things. It's like the Storm this year with Elise Katoa. It's like, well, if anyone's going to bring the best out of him, it's going to be the Storm, and Garner going to the Panthers, and Hoskins. Like obviously we'll get into them teams in probably part 3. But it's just those. But in terms of a team that needs that, proven first graders, they're obviously not going to fill that void, eh?
No, and I think we've got to quickly point and have a quick discussion on the coaching factor. And Seabolt, Des obviously has now got the sack from Manly. It was sort of their deer in headlights for quite a lot towards the back half of last year. And Seabolt, he's had his fair share of ups and downs, mainly downs throughout most of his coaching career, it's fair to be said. And he's always been questioned with his philosophies and how he thinks. He's an overthinker. He really bombards the players with his coaching ways and too much sort of the visual stuff and things like that, where Des would have been the total opposite. So this whole playing group and the Trebojevic brothers especially, they loved Des. And I believe most of the players still loved Des and didn't want him to go. It was more of the backroom that ended up making him go. But that could also impact the playing group, because if you've got a coach now coming in who pushes his way so hard, like a Hitler style, and the players aren't already buying in at the club, that could really quickly derail the whole season. And after round 6 or 7, they got no wins there, and you could be thinking, well, Seabold, I think the boardroom have egg on their faces now for this move. Where are you at with Seabold? Do you think it's the right fit, or do you think Desi should have kept it?
Oh, well, Desi's been hard done by. Obviously, there's disconnect there with the ownership and him, and it's just funny, and especially how it's upset the guys we just focused on before, the Turbos, well, I should say, the Travojeviches. Look, see, I kind of do echo everything you say there. I will say one thing in Seabold's defense. I do think he wasn't celebrated enough in terms of the success he did get out of the Rabbitohs.
Yeah.
He was coach of the year. He was like, holy smokes, he got this left side cracking. So I don't feel like he got celebrated enough. And also, you got to remember that a lot of people actually predicted him to win coach of the year when he went to the Broncos. And now we all kind of thought that was an interesting situation that happened with Bennett, but a lot of people did kind of view it still working out. It just didn't like how it happened. So with that positives that's happened and him reflecting on having that time away from the game, what he could do better. And he's obviously been, because it was with the Knights for a stint there, wasn't he, working as an assistant, or was he with someone else?
Yeah.
So he's obviously still within, the rugby league circle. So work on those positives that he has proven in top level. He has proven something already, and then reflecting on it. That is obviously, and then the boys, in terms of Tom and Jake, they haven't left as well. They could have easily just, kicked the toys and gone, and not many people would have blamed them. So it says a lot that they haven't done that. So it'll be interesting. But you brought up stuff, the jersey stuff. There's a lot of red flags here. Too many for me to see Seabold having the most successful year.
Yeah, I agree. We'll move on to the next team on the list, and I think this is one again that I feel like the slippery slide is looking directly at him, and they're about to jump on it. The Dragons we're talking about, and if it wasn't just the fact, I feel like their recruitment has been quite poor. It's also the fact that some of the injuries now, they've lost a couple of key young players, whether it's injury or it's suspensions, the no-fault stand-down by the NRL. Luke, where are you at with the Drugs? I feel like this could be another team where you're about to say the slippery slide's right there, jump on it.
Yeah, well, it is, but it's funny because the Dragons, like in defense of the Dragons, you look at their roster and they reflect a team that will slide down, but their roster reflected them finishing lower than what they actually did as well too. So they've kind of outperformed, but still disappointed in the same way, because there's been stuff happening. We had the barbecue gate 2 seasons ago, and you've obviously had an incident in the off season with Amon.
Cody Ramsey.
So even though, what was that? Sorry,
Cody Ramsey's now out as well with that unfortunate illness. So
and it was one of those funny things, like they're disappointed, and that actually reminded me there. I think why it's like, okay, yes, they've finished higher than they perceived. Like if you had to go roster, they've outperformed it. But like you just mentioned, just remind me of Tyrell Sloan. He was meant to be the gun, didn't perform, and Cody Ramsey, he performed quite, like he outdid my expectations. Let's just put it that way at fullback. Not saying he couldn't be a quality first grader, but I wouldn't have pictured fullback, and especially wouldn't have picked him ousting Tyrell Sloan. So that's the thing. I think a lot of the things we saw shining lights just didn't work out. And obviously Sims has gone to the Storm, and he was always rumoured to go. So look, it's one of those things where I just don't see them making the 8, and then I'll see them being bottom end, but I could see us just doing this exact same potty again, where we say the same, and they still finished in that 10th, 11th range. But it's one of those. But the thing is, I think the most important thing to bring up is there going to be a coaching change? Do we just we've had it with this? Yes, we've kind of not dropped to the bottom, but mediocrity isn't good enough. So, yeah, Oh, yeah, and I'll let you follow up on that. I'm
Yeah.
guessing you're kind of feeling the same.
Yeah, I am. I feel like the Dragons this year are a very interesting side in terms of I feel like this is the year where their undoings of the last couple of years, whether it's coaching decisions, recruitment decisions, sort of comes back and bites them this year. And I sort of, to paint a picture to a lot of people out there, it's like Sloan, for instance. He was this time last year, everyone was raving about him. And I think most people had him in their super coach team because he was cheap and he was
Mm.
also apparently with the young gun and he was going to have the year out of all years and really establish himself. And Griffin seemed to have favoured the more senior players. It's fair. I'll be nice and put it that way. More so on the towards the back end of this year, in their career. We then seen Ramsey move to fullback as well later in the season, and that did work. So credit for that. But you've got like players like Sloan now. He now has to come into it, and he's the vital piece of for mine the Dragons this year because Hunt can't do it himself. We all know what Hunt's going to produce. He'll produce 8 out of 10 games every week, but he needs players around him to do the same. And I don't think the Dragons have had that for a while. They've always had players who are too much on a roller coaster. And Sloan, for me, I don't blame Sloan if he doesn't start the season off red hot because he's just had his confidence absolutely destroyed in the last 6 to 12 months. And it's all down to the fault for mine of Griffin. And I don't think he's handled that situation perfectly. And you said it earlier about Manly and certain players going to teams like the Storm, Panthers. You'd probably throw maybe like the Cowboys and maybe Para into that at the moment with their successes. And their coaches are much better at producing players. Like Para fans, for instance, were complaining that we lost Papali'i last year, but they got to remember when he first came to us, he was a no-name. That he was basically on the edge of his career. Warriors weren't even playing him half the time, and he came to become the best second rower in the comp. So can Griffin do that? I don't think he can. And I feel like he's shot a lot of these younger players' confidence. They need a fresh start. For mine, I was shocked that they didn't get rid of Griffin this at the end of last year to get that fresh start. They're, as I said at the start with this preview for the Dragons, I think all their shortcomings will make them become undone for now this season. And it's unfortunate for the fans because Dragons fans, before you get too upset with us, I love the Dragons fans. They're one of the most passionate fan bases in the game that we've got, but they don't personally deserve this. And I know that a lot of Dragons fans and a lot of them aren't happy with the situation for both the team on the field and away from the field. And you know what? Some of them actually said to me, they hope they do come last this year because it forces the club to make the changes. If they have another year, like you said, that could happen, they finish 9th or 10th or 11th, they might go, yep, that's good enough. Give Griffin another extension. And I know most Dragons fans at the moment don't want that. So it's a massive, massive 5 to 6 weeks to start this comp for the Dragons, I feel.
Yeah, I think just bringing up that wooden spoon point, it's like there's two good reasons to like there's two decent scenarios. Obviously, wooden spoon's always going to suck, but there's two scenarios where you go, okay, either that's developing young talent or you're forcing change.
Yeah.
And that's probably they might be able to fit both boats if they do that. But like you said, he has favoured the older players in the past, so. Yeah, and obviously you got a guy there, Ben Hunt, who is really proven me wrong as a halfback. I've always thought he's a quality halfback, but as his career progressed, it looked least likely. It looked like, put him at hooker. He was fantastic last year. You just can't hide it. So I feel bad for him, and he really stood up for the club with that ceremony issue, with the end of year awards. That was an interesting debacle. I think only like a handful of people.
Three or four players ended up turning up. Like that's
yeah. So but I'm glad he was obviously the one that didn't, or he wasn't there, or basically voiced his concerns. So but at the end of the day, they could still be, not. They even need to, like you said, finish wooden spoon or make the 8, and I feel like they're going to fit in between, just because it's what the Dragons do.
Yeah, and they'll start red hot and fall down like most
Yeah.
years. But for mine, as I said, the first 6 to 8 weeks for this team is crucial, and we'll see how it goes. Next team on the list for us is the Broncos, and I don't think the fans want to remember last year too much. Look, they did improve from the year before. The only way was basically up for them, but geez, they were basically penned in for a final spot and somehow found a way not to make it. And you sort of got to laugh because it was just in that situation, it was almost impossible for them to do it. But in the back of, I think, most fans' mind, we sort of could see it coming. It was like a crash course, and it was crazy to watch, but you just sort of knew every week, oh yeah, they'll lose this. They'll find a way to lose it. I think there was a couple of games that they were up by like 10 or 12 with like maybe 10 to go. And you just knew you were like, nah, they'll lose this. They'll find something to do here and they'll lose this. So they've got some interesting games. They've got Reece Walsh coming from the Warriors. They've got Jesse Arthurs is back from the Warriors after his loan spell. Jock Madden for mine, a young prospect, could be a nice signing for him in the future. He's screaming for an opportunity, for a chance, but I don't know if he'll get in the way of Ezra Mann or Reynolds at the moment there. But and then Tapau, obviously last week signed with him, but they've lost sort of some players as well. Where are you at with the Broncos? Are you thinking they can finally right their wrongs and edge into the 8, or is there a possibility? They're pretty much sitting halfway, so they're either going up or down. So
I think for me, it's a hat trick of downward slopes, in terms of Manly, Dragons, now the Broncos, just culture, just everything of the culture at the moment just seems in tatters. And then there's a couple of factors we go, now hang on a second. These, obviously Reynolds was the big inclusion last year, and that's why I always have hesitations. Like, God, I value Reynolds a lot. And also that he wanted to go there. Like, obviously, you do choose to sign your contract. Like, I'm not surprised anyone there. But he took on the challenge. He knew that there was going to be challenges. And we did see last year he played some fantastic footy. You also got to put in the fact that, though, he does have injury concerns as well. So I am thinking the downward slope. I think there's some young players that need that real leadership. And obviously they were nicknamed the Baby Broncos for a long time. Lots of Jordan Ricky really needs to prove himself. Yeah. So with Jordan Ricky is a fantastic talent. Why I'm just giving him an insight. He was over, so not too far from where I live. So I was living over in Christchurch where he was playing footy. Freak of a talent. Like, he was like one of those guys. He just stood out. And you just see stuff like him doing chip kicks and showing off all the skills and all that. And yeah, and then I think sometimes he's relied on that natural brilliance a bit, and he's learning a bit about himself and what it takes to be that role player, second rower. I feel like he did make strides last year, but he was playing against guys like Griffin Neame, who's a good mate of mine that playing the Cowboys and that. But yeah, so I really want Jordan Ricky to succeed. So hopefully, and with Reynolds next to him, but he's just another example. Obviously, Cobbo needs to bounce back from his comments. I will say, if the Broncos surprise us or surprise myself and think, right, they make the 8, I reckon the big reason will be this Paddy Carrigan is special. I think he is a fantastic leader. We saw him at Origin, and I actually think the most significant thing was we saw when he got injured at the end of last year. Is no coincidence that the drop-off happened when he got injured. So for me, or suspension, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or was it injury?
No, it was suspension. It was.
Yeah. So I think, I'm putting my eggs in both baskets here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he will be that guy that we look at.
I feel like that's appropriate comment there with the Broncos, is putting sort of eggs in both baskets, because that's sort of where I'm at with them, is that I'll have a post out next week for the page, but a little sneak peek into it is we ran the polls and that for teams where they'll finish on the ladder, etc. And the League of Interest fans actually put the Broncos to come 8th. So they think they'll actually make the 8 this year and right the wrongs of last year. And I've sort of got them on that 8th to maybe 11th and in that sort of that bracket. And
I've got them bottom 4 at the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At a real,
But
like, haven't really sat down and
yeah.
mapped it out, but I've got a bottom four feel.
But I can also see where you're coming from with that because for mine, and I think about it, the culture for mine, I'm with you. It's shocking. It's shithouse to be honest. It's you can't have these players coming out, and it's not the first time saying these comments about their coach. Like the successful clubs, we have not heard that ever. We don't hear players coming out, like any Penrith players coming out saying about Cleary. We don't hear Storm players coming out saying about Bellamy, and they're clubs that hold themselves at the highest of regards. And the Broncos were this 10, 15 years ago, but they've slowly let themselves slip. So now that the players are allowed to basically do this stuff, like 10, 15 years ago, you can't sit there and say players like Lockyer and that would have gone on a podcast if they were around back then and said those sorts of comments because they knew they would have known that their punishments there would have been severe. And instead of punishments from, say, Cobbo's point of view, the club basically has come out and enforced players to front media to say they like the coach and they back the coach. We all know why they're doing that because the club's come out and said, put it out there and show you back the coach. It's for mine, I would have preferred the club to come out and say, we're aware of the comments made. Cobbo's been punished in-house by the club. But the matter's been resolved. We don't need to hear the sort of the fake baloney that comes out of clubs. We all know it now and push the coach. I think massive pressure now on Walters because if they don't start well, there's a few teams we keep saying this about, but this one, they're crucial because they're coming off losing, 8 out of the last 9 or 10 or something last year. And then this year, if they start losing at the start, that's going to be a big losing streak. He, like, as much as the Broncos love him, you'll have to part ways with him because you can't keep that losing going, knowing that these comments are slowly leaking out by players. Everyone will start thinking there's got to be something wrong here. So I can see where you're coming from with it. And the more I sort of think about it, the more I'm starting to lean your way. But it'll be interesting with the Bronx. I think they're in for a really interesting year, but let's try and touch on one of these teams that actually made the 8 last year, and that's the Raiders. For mine, the Raiders are a very interesting one. I'll let you start with the Raiders. I'm not going to say anything here first because I just don't know.
Yeah, I think I have them missing the 8, and I guess I'll start with my prediction. But
just before you say that, I'll just say in history repeating in the last however many years the NRL's been in, there's been about 2 to 3 teams will drop out of the 8 and 2 to 3 teams always go in each year. So I feel like when we make these, we've got to factor in there'll be at least probably 2 teams that come out each year.
Yeah, and that actually is a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because I actually come to that logic the other day too. I just don't see them making any leaps, and I see other teams making leaps, and I also see a couple of things. Joseph Tarpany was fantastic.
Yeah.
But he has had an indifferent career, so he's got to back it up again. Josh Papali'i kind of had it looked like he was he had quite a fall from grace, actually. Like he was the best prop in the planet by quite a margin, just before Payne Haas was ascending. And then he had it's like it just felt. And then last year kind of got back there, but he is aging. And I just feel like there's a couple little trends of players. I kind of spoke about this with the Warriors, I believe. There's no one really peaking except for Tapani, and he's one of those players I'm just not too sure on. And at the end of the day, the guy that is at the helm is the most roller coaster of roller coasters and Ricky Stewart.
Yeah.
He seemed to be at a good point at the end of last season, but I just don't see them ascending. And at the end of the day, that might just be enough for them to drop out, and it's more on the other teams around them. Look, there could be things like Xavier Savage turns into a clear top 10 fullback in the game. Jack Wyden is like, hang on, put my name in number 6 jersey for 6 jersey hat for the Blues. Stuff like that. There's potential. They performed better when Jamal Fogarty got some runs on the board. But it's just nothing. Just Canberra. And I've never been to Canberra in my life, but it just seems very Canberra. And it's like it seems very Dragons, just a bit So just no, not too much to say on them. And it's like he said, one teams have to drop out, just the logic of it all. And for me, it's them.
I'm with you. I'm just mad with the Raiders. It's just the losses. For mine, the losses far outweigh the gains. They've lost some key players. I know Hodgson was injured for pretty much the whole of last year, but they have lost him. They've lost Elliott, Nickel Clockstad, and Ryan Sutton as well. So, and they've only gained really Danny Levi, really. So, they're just, and I'm with you, like Ricky for mine. And I sort of had an egg on my face towards the end of it, but I had predicted they needed to part ways with him last year. I think there was that mid-year where they just looked shocking, but they sort of ended up coming back. And I think Ricky and the Raiders need to be thankful that the Broncos had the 4 that they did. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the 8. They wouldn't have scraped in. But luckily, the Broncos have kept them into a successful year as such. They sort of went out straight away. But, I try and think of ways that they can be a top 8 team, and I don't really think of much at all. Like, the only thing that gets me is that playing it in Canberra, and if they can build that as a fortress, then that's basically 10, maybe 11 guaranteed wins each year. But they haven't really done that lately. I think the last year or two, they haven't really made that a place where the opposition is scared of. It's sort of like they embrace it and they go there and just get the job done, really. I'm sort of with you. I think the Raiders slip out of the 8, and it's bold prediction. I'll say it again. I'll say Ricky's time at the Raiders will be up by the end of this season in 2023, and I think
it's gonna be right Sunday, mate. So
I just think they've got to be due for a fresh start, because I don't think you should have that meh feeling towards the start of the season. You should have a bit of it for any reason. Like, all the teams below them, most of them have reasons to be happy or excited for the year ahead. And I just feel like with the Raiders, they've sort of gone, we've got some players here we believe in and we think we can do a job. We'll sort of see what happens there. But I think, Luke, for that one, that's going to be us, because we've obviously just been ourselves and got into some details. But easy questions this time, because obviously there's only 4 teams who went over then. Out of the 4, which team do you see finishing the lowest?
Oh.
And there was a few fallen from grace in this pack. So
Manly.
Wow. I'll lock in the Dragons. I'll go.
I've kind of gone over. I believe the Dragons won't, and it's just because they should, but they won't.
Yeah.
So to be fair, they're the biggest disappointments, because they. I shouldn't say, but the thing with the Dragons, like, I'm not saying like they should deliberately play bad, but they should not be stuck in between, and I think we've made that pretty clear. So don't hate us, Dragon fans.
Please no.
But yeah, I just think it's Manly. But can I say, with Manly, fade me on Manly, because every year I've predicted them to make the 8, they've missed. Every time I've told them to miss the 8, they've made it. Every year, because I had them top 6 last year. I think I had them actually, I'm pretty sure I had them. I know some people had them in the grand final. I know So fade me. So they're probably going to win the comp now. But
true. I'll lock in the Dragons. I'll just be short and sharp that I think Griffin's time is up, and they're living in the past, basically. The team out of those 4 that you'll either think will stay in the 8 or climb into the 8, if any. I think we've got to pick one. It's going to be hard, because I don't think any of them will.
Yeah, I'll just go Raiders. Raiders.
I'll just to be different, I'll go the Broncos. I'll say they might get it together. I think they'll rely heavily on Reynolds and Capewell's leadership to make that happen. And I just think there is some talent there, as we did discuss. If Ricky can find his form again, if Carrigan, if Payne Haas can overcome his family issues, he can be the best prop in the game. We've seen that in the past. But big things happen. When you say players need to perform at their best, it's not a good thing. But if Broncos can do it, then I feel like they can. Guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for the support so far to start the year for both pages. Luke, Rugby League Lounge, myself, League of Inches. Give us a follow, give us a like, share any content that we have. Muchly appreciated. And Luke, until next time, enjoy. I think next week we've got some trials starting to come, so we might be able to quickly have a chat about those as well. But we'll keep going. I think we've got part 3, and we'll see what teams we can get through. Might be able to get through at least 3 next time.
Yeah, I think there will be a part 4, mate. But no, it's good. And at the end of the day, it's probably what the fans want as well, because you more detail. I will note I come across a little bit negative on these teams, but I must say I just look, and we could spend time. There is shining lights, guys. Like the Feagai twins, for the Dragons. With the Broncos, there is a lot of good young talent. Like Hobbo is a sensational talent. Raiders, Savage, Tomoko. So there is great talent. But if we're just talking about your team success, I think it's more a credit to other teams as well. And that's sometimes why we have to come at this angle. But yeah, I'm looking forward to looking into those trials. I found out there's Storm Warriors trials just over the hill in a couple of weeks. So I might have to see if we can get there.
Post some content of that. That'd be good. I think, it's been good.
Pressure's on.
Pressure's on. Thanks for listening, guys. And we'll be back next week. Thank you.